Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare.
Hello, and welcome to Truth Be Told Transformation. I'm Bonnie Burkert, and you were just hearing a little snippet from a beautiful mantra by Jai Uttal. Jai, welcome to Truth Be Told Transformation.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to tell you that you are in heavy rotation on the soundtrack of my life, especially in this past year. But for a long time, I have found that having a mantra, having a beautiful song with a devotional message has really helped me stay calm, but actually get deeper into meditation. So I'd like to ask you to talk to us a little bit about how you discovered this for yourself and what it does for you.
Well, I wish I could say I was more calm, but many years ago, I first was exposed to Indian music, Indian instrumental music, as well as Indian singing and Indian chanting, and then a little bit later into Indian sacred song, sacred chanting. And I found that more than anything else, I found that when I would sing these chants and these mantras, I would become connected to my inner world. And, sometimes that was very joyful and sometimes that was painful because it was, there's a well of everything inside of us. But gradually, as I became more comfortable with singing, because I was playing instruments since I was very young, but gradually as I became more comfortable with singing, I found that it became sort of a life support system for me. Singing mantras, with many different melodies and styles, but still singing these ancient mantras was like sustaining my soul in a way that nothing else did.
That's beautiful. I'll give an anecdote of when I first discovered it. I was living in New York City back in the 90s when yoga wasn't quite as huge as it is now. And my yoga studio was having kirtan sessions in the evening. And kirtan is mantra singing, but it's more in the call and response tradition. Right. So and I mean, probably my first exposure and a great example for people that aren't necessarily into this genre of music would be George Harrison, My Sweet Lord. I mean, how moving is that? So yeah, I would be going to these yoga sessions on a Friday night instead of running off to CBGB's, which is where all my other friends were. And I really had a discovery of time passing. My eyes would close, I'd be relaxed. I'd be singing along, good music, rhythm, and what felt like 45 minutes was actually 90. And that was where despite years of having done years of yoga before, I lost myself there. So I want you to know that I'm inviting everybody to have an exploration and certainly explore Jai's music. So Jai, two ways to talk about this. One, would you like to comment on Nod Yoga, the yoga of sound science?
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm mostly involved in is called Bhakti Yoga, but Bhakti Yoga and Nada Yoga are very intertwined. In the ancient scriptures, it's written that sound is God. So, and it's not like sound is a doorway to God or sound brings you to God. It says sound is God. So the Nada yogis concentrate on the inner sound and they chant Om and then they go into silence and listen inwardly to the sound of the universe vibrating in their molecules. It's very esoteric.
Yes.
What I've been much more involved in my whole life is called Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion or the yoga of personal connection with the divine through music, through the emotions, through all the feelings in the heart. And we sing mantras, and the mantras themselves are filled with transformative power. And yes, in Nada Yoga, they also sing the mantras, but they don't explore melody, they don't explore rhythm. And all the ways that melody and rhythm can enliven the emotional world inside of our heart and connect that emotional world to spirit.
All right, let's give some examples of favorite mantras. I mean, we started off with Hare Krishna um, in the beginning of the show. So tell us that about that one, how that feels for you, and some others.
Um, well, Hare Krishna mantra, kind of has a bit of a bad rep in the West, just because it. Well, I don't even think I'm going to go into that, but it's a very, very ancient mantra, and it's incredible the understanding of what it means. There's many ways to understand what it means, but Hare is the feminine, the divine feminine, and Krishna is the divine masculine. So we're singing when we sing Hare Krishna, we're invoking, we're calling this ecstatic love that can never be separated. It's like this union of ecstatic love. But then we sing Krishna, Krishna, Hare, Hare, and suddenly they're separated, and it's like, oh God, this anxiety and anguish of separation. And then the next phase of the mantra says Hare Rama, and Rama is the divine masculine, and Hare, the divine feminine. And they're united again in ecstatic union. And then Rama, Rama, Hare, Hare, and they're separated. And for me, this is such a beautiful picture of human life. Sometimes we feel so deeply connected to our inner spirit, to our beloveds around us, to nature, you know, to consciousness. And then sometimes, just out of the blue, we seem to disconnect. You look at your closest one and you say, who are you and who am I, and nature and spirit, and in bhakti, that those periods of separation and that terribly uncomfortable, awful feeling of disconnection is serves us to increase our longing and to increase our passion for connection. So for me, that's one thing that mantra represents.
I love that, and I thank you for the education on that. There's a lot of details in there that I didn't realize in hearing that. So you know what you were saying about the separation. It kind of makes me think about the pause that we hear sometimes in music. And I know your musical tastes are very broad, and your influences also are not just from Indian ragas, but also American rock and what I say, more roots music and things like that. So, but just talking about music in general, I'd say the pause, right? I mean, the pregnant pause between notes also can be very powerful.
The freaking pause between notes is so underrated. My God, it's like, as well as the dissonance, the dissonant
Yeah.
notes, that it's like then resolution, and this separation and connection, separation and connection. It's so powerful. If music is moving along at an even clip and there's never any tension, there's never any pause, well, it can still be quite beautiful, but after a while it gets tiresome. Whereas, well, or not tiresome, boring maybe is the word.
Yeah.
But when there are those pauses where I'm just waiting, it's like you're waiting for the divine kiss, or the human kiss, and you gotta wait for a second, and then there it is. It's so much richer, right?
I like that. Good things come to those who wait, indeed. So, all right, shall we talk about Shiva? Lord Shiva.
Sure,
I
sure.
mean, and that was another mantra for me again in my studies in the back in New York before just tiptoeing into awareness around this, chanting. I'm just now thinking about this as I speak to you, but chanting Om Namah Shivaya. And what that did for me, it was another really transcendent experience for me, Jai. So that's always one of my favorites. And I know on your new record, you've got a really beautiful version of that,
Om
your
Namah
mantra from that.
Shivaya, yeah, a
Yes.
very, very long meditative version of
Yeah.
it. Um, Om Namah Shivaya is one of the ancient mantras, and of course, in many of the yoga studios, we'll see statues of Shiva dancing. Shiva is the deity uh, of who sits at the end of every cycle, whether it's a cycle, universal cycle, or whether it's just go down to the breath, the end of the breath. Shiva is the Lord of transformation.
Mm.
He's called the destroyer. He's all, because he's the one who destroys illusion, who rips away the veils. But Shiva is also very, very benevolent, and he's considered to be the easiest aspect of God to invoke, to ask for favors, so to speak. Shiva, he is often pictured. He lives on Mount Kailash, which is right next to Everest, Mount Everest, and it's in Tibet. It's a real mountain, and Shiva has got long dreadlocks, and his body is covered with ash, and he's got the Ganges River descending from heaven into his top knot and then flowing gently down to earth. And he's really radical. When we sing Om Namah Shivaya, one of the more, I'd say, universal understandings of what that mantra means, we're saying Om, which is the primordial sound, and then Nama means I offer myself, I bow to, I offer my will to thy will, unto Shiva, Shivaya. So it's like saying, not my will, but I offer myself to the ocean of benevolent consciousness, Shiva.
I want to talk about that. Thank you for that explanation. And again, I'm learning all the more every time.
Me too. I'm learning all the time too.
Isn't it grand? So, with I hear a lot about duality, and it's something that I myself have contemplated a lot. Just because I think feel that we're supposed to always be happy and up and feel fantastic, and sometimes you don't. So, you were talking about Shiva as a destroyer. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about what that's meant for you, particularly in this last year, for all of us. And as we are in 2021 at the moment as we speak, but looking back on the last 18 months. And I'd like to ask specifically about the song that I mentioned that closes your record, Let Me Burn. You can talk a little bit about the devotion that really pours out of that song, as well as the title track, Let Me Burn. So I'll let you kind of jump around between those two.
Well, globally, personally, individually, this has been a tough time. And unfortunately, it's not looking like it's completely over. But, when the pandemic started, there's a goddess, actually the consort of Shiva, the beloved of Lord Shiva, Shakti, who manifests in many, many different forms. And one of her forms is Karuna, which means compassion. So I started out by calling Corona, I was calling it Karuna, Karuna Ma. And this is just, framing for my own really psychological well-being, maybe, because at first, of course, like everyone, I was completely freaked out. But when I could frame this thing as the Divine Mother, as Mother Earth, compassionately destroying evil, the way Shiva and his beloved Shakti does, I could feel more calm and see what was happening, see that the skies were getting clearer, and that the waters were flowing more freely. However, as the months dragged on, we know it was very, very difficult. And I kept the intention, I was doing weekly live streams and really trying to stay connected with people. I was, as we were social distancing, I was trying very hard to keep the intention of soul and heart not distancing, of closeness. Let's get even more close. But that dichotomy between my own anxiety and my own fears, as well as my own spiritual intentions, it creates a friction, and the friction creates a fire. And this fire was like, I considered it a purifying fire of my heart and of the hearts of everyone who has that kind of intention. But we were burning, and the earth is still burning, and humanity is still burning. And I pray that the burning it brings us to openness. At the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, well, at the end of this, we're either going to have people standing at their doors with shotguns, or we're going to have open hearted communities working together um, to build and create and nurture a world that can last. And now that the pandemic is semi over in California, we see that both things happened. Some people became much more locked in fear and isolation, and other people became much more open and grateful for the community and the love that we have. Anyway, it is hard work internally, and it's, as I said, it's still going on. Then when I came to, so that Let Me Burn really reflects
Yes,
that.
yes.
But then the last song, there comes a time when, wow, we've just been through the ringer. We've just been through it. I mean, whether it's something that happens in somebody's personal life or this global ringer, there comes a time when we just take a breath. And even if we know it's not over, but for a moment we just take a breath and we know, ah, let's really relax and nurture our own hearts and the hearts of people around us, and let's chill out. And so, I sang this Om Namah Shivaya. I didn't plan to make it 13 and a half minutes. And I didn't plan to, I mean, I thought I would add a lot of production and whatever to it. I didn't plan on leaving it so bare bones. But when I started singing it, I felt this peace, this heartful peace, and I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop, and so I kept going and I kept going, and I imagined it, just in my own imagination. Shiva is the destroyer. But then I imagined that after destroying this world or that world, he goes back to his beloved and he puts his dreadlocked head on her lap and she sings this lullaby. So that's why I called it After the Fire, Shiva's Lullaby. It's actually his beloved Parvati singing to him to calm him and to relax him and to soothe him after this intensity.
I love that. We'll make sure that the link to that particular song is in the comments so that everyone can find it. But Jai's album "Let Me Burn" is up on where you listen to digital music, and I think some CDs are available as well. Um, oh, thank you for posting that pretty picture up there. So, Jai, I'd like to talk about the concept of because we're about transformation on this show. So, Into the Fire, Let Me Burn. I mean, it sounds kind of brutal, but I know you've spoken a little bit about the global picture on what we're what we're letting go of and having to release. But just in general, the metaphor of burning as transformation. If you'd like to give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I think you just said it, that any time a big change comes, whether it's external or internal, it's we go through a period of what feels like burning. At least me, some people are like so easy with change, but I'm not. When things change, and I'm very change resistant, which is funny because my wife Nubia, she's always rearranging the house and improving the house, but it's like oh, it's different today. But anyway, the change, that fire that comes when transformation comes, we all go through it. We can use different metaphors for it, but fire is one of the metaphors for transformation. And look, just in the natural world, fire turns things to ash, and following this metaphor, we hope that what rises out from the fire, that the ash that actually comes from the fire, is actually a newer us and a more shining, more connected, divinely inspired us. Um, we hope that in any transformational period in our life, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it happens, the transformation happens quickly, sometimes we struggle for a long time, but it's like a fire. And so the story behind Let Me Burn, my songs have a story and they don't have a story, but there is a particular story around this, and it comes from an Indian epic called the Ramayana. And obviously, I can't tell this whole story now, but Sita, the goddess, has been abducted by the demon king, the embodiment of evil. And her husband, Sita's husband, Rama, uh, goes on a quest to find her. And there's a war happens, and it's like a major epic, and it's so beautiful. But at the end, when the demons are defeated, there's some murmurings in the populace. Well, Sita has been in the kingdom of the demon Ravana for all these months. Has she stayed true to her beloved? And Sita hears this, so she invokes the god of fire, Agni, and she says, "If I have been untrue to my beloved Rama, in thought, word, or deed, even in a dream, let me burn." So she steps into the fire. And the fire is huge and it wraps itself around her, but she's unscathed. And then that's why she says, "If I have been untrue, let me burn." But she doesn't burn, and she steps out in shining, beautiful, beatific glory into Rama's arms.
Wahe Guru. That is a beautiful story. Um, all right. Well, it's a beautiful song too, and I know that it's quite an epic song, and I'm, happy to. I think it's a great title track for that record. So,
Me
Jai,
too.
another Indian deity we have to speak about, and one of my favorite songs that you also sing is about Ganesha.
Ganesha. Yes, I put out a double album of kirtan songs. Oh gosh, like 2005 or 2004. I'm not even sure. And the first song is a song to Ganesha, and I had a young child sing it with me, and her name was Shirako. She was maybe 6 or something. It was so fun because before she even sang, she said, "You have to pay me now."
Oh
So,
my God.
but anyway, Ganesha is the elephant-headed god. Ganesha is one of the sons of Shiva and Parvati, and as such, he has all the attributes of Lord Shiva, but he is particularly known as the remover of obstacles from our path. And in India, anytime a new business or a marriage or any new endeavor, whether it's whatever, any new endeavor started, Ganesha is always invoked at the beginning. Please remove the obstacles from our path so we have success in this endeavor. And also, Ganesha, when you see the pictures of the statues, he's missing one of his trunks, or there's just a little stub of one of his trunks, because when the composer of the ancient texts, the Vedas, was looking for a pen, he couldn't find a pen, so he turned to Ganesha, and Ganesha gave him his trunk to use as a pen to write the Vedas. Um, Ganesha is always surrounded by piles of sweets and cookies and cakes and stuff. He's a very much of an enjoyer as well. And yeah, so
It's
so
great. Those are some really great anecdotes. Again, I didn't know he likes treats, so another reason
yeah.
to dig him. It's interesting, and I love hearing these stories from you because I I think I came to the deities probably through mantras. So, in fact, I wasn't even thinking that Om Namah Shivaya when I was singing that. It's like, oh, it sounded great. But then I realized, oh, that's for Shiva. And so I just want to say sometimes the Indian deities they're very foreign, Jai. How do we Westerners relate? And what would be kind of an intro and what was it like for you as you were understanding that? I know you went to India, so that may have helped, as it did me.
Well, I can't use myself as a very good example because as soon as I heard about first thing I ever saw, like a picture or first music I ever heard from India, I was in love with it. So I had never had any of that. Oh, this is foreign. How do I get into it? I just never had that. But I will share a story. I teach for the last 20 years, twice a year, kirtan camps. It's been a little different now with the pandemic. We've been doing it online on a different kind of schedule. But for 20 years in the winter, we'd go to a warm, tropical, wonderful place, and we would spend a week or 10 days teaching and exchanging and sharing kirtan and all the context and etc. etc. So one year, this is quite a few years ago, we were at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, and we were in the 3 days into the kirtan camp, and a woman, I didn't know her at the time. We're friends, we've become friends, but she said, "So I'm having trouble with all this. You got blue skin gods, you got elephant gods, monkey gods. I'm an atheist, and I don't know how to relate to all this. What do you suggest?" So rather than actually suggesting anything, I asked her, "Well, how are you feeling? I mean, forget about your belief system for a minute and just share with us how you're feeling. How's your heart feeling? How's your body feeling?" And she said a bunch of things. She said, "Well, first of all, normally I live a very flat emotional life, and these last 3 days I find myself laughing. Find myself tearing up and crying. It's very strange, but it feels very beautiful to me. Also, I never like to connect with other people. I'm very solitary. I'm a loner. But now I find that I'm having these deep, deep conversations with all these people here." And then she said, "Also, I'm a city girl, and I'm not much into nature. Now, the nature at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala is magnificent." But she says, but now I'm looking at every flower, and I'm looking at every tree and the lake and the mountains, and oh, it's just so beautiful." And I said to her, "Well, you could be the poster girl for kirtan because you are experiencing all the effects of it. But we all have belief systems that live in our minds, and they're all valid and they're all wonderful, but they don't necessarily need to be the leader of our lives. Let the heart be the leader of our lives." And so I suggested just follow your experience and don't think too much about it. And well, she's deep into kirtan and bhakti and all this stuff now, all these years later. Um, I don't know. It doesn't totally answer your question.
It does, though. I think that is incredible because she she got past the form of the monkey god, the elephant god, the god with the dreadlocks and the ash all over him.
What I love about this tradition is that each person can relate to it in their own way. Uh, some people would just get behind the singing and the sound of the words and don't even want to really know what the words mean. And other people, really want to go into the context and understand what the different deities, well, who they are, I guess you could say, get more friendly with them. And other people, will just think there's just the one. It's just the one. We're just singing to the one. Or some people won't even. There's no even external god. It's just or goddess. It's just singing to the the light inside of us. And it's just so beautiful that the practice of kirtan and just the whole realm of bhakti, of devotion, accommodates any belief that anyone has. And I tell the story of the Ramayana that I just mentioned to you about Sita. At our kirtan camps, I spend 7 days telling that story. Not for the whole day, but and I say to people, you can take this as a really cool fairy tale. You can take it as a psychological map. You can take it as pure history, that is, literal history. You can take it as metaphor, as archetype, or again, it can be just you can just take it as a fable. Um, it doesn't even matter because there's so much potency within the story and within the names of the deities, and you know, take it anywhere you like. That's the way I feel.
I I love that, and it definitely it applies to me because, as I mentioned in my story before, I didn't necessarily know what I was singing. I just knew that I was lost for a little while in a good way, like in a much needed way. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it really provided an essential change in my life because I think I was, just way too stressed out. And it
We
really,
all
really,
are, Bonnie.
yeah, I know, but
Our culture is.
I know. It's so true. And yet, I definitely find that the mantra, pick a mantra, any mantra, it doesn't necessarily even have to be Hindu, Sanskrit, right? It could be
Yeah.
anything that just has a calming quality for you.
I think many indigenous cultures have equivalent to kirtan. You listen to African chanting, communal call and responsive chanting with dancing and drumming. Um, Certainly, my wife is Brazilian, and there's a whole culture in Brazil of kind of trance call and response singing and dancing. I think it is part of the human DNA to invoke spirit, both celebrate spirit as well as call for spirit to come uh, through repetition and through music, through melody and through rhythm. It seems to be, part of, well, society kind of doesn't, it constricts that action, but you know we're finding our way to experience how beautiful that is.
Jai, I heard an interview with you recently, and you described melody, and I'm going to ask you to kind of see if you can fill in the words, but you said it so perfectly. You're writing songs of love to these deities and to what they represent. So, talk to me a little bit about that songwriting process and just really that's that part of the devotion. So, not only the singing part, but how you've crafted these beautiful songs. The music is great.
Thank you. Well, Bonnie, actually, I have so many different modes of songwriting. Often, these days, often I'll be sitting with a guitar and just really noodling around, doodling around, not focusing, and then I'll just hear something, and that will awaken. Might be a chord or two, and that will sort of awaken a melody in me, and I'll sing it. I might start singing it with just la la la, but then it becomes like a dialogue that I'm having with my guru, with my inner light, and and with my beloved, and I'm just, each time you sing it, you want to sing it a little bit more beautiful to express your feelings, whether the feelings are longing or whether the feelings are just love. It's just, you want to express it in the most beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way that you can. Um, Many of my songs come from improvising. Like I'll be singing, and sometimes even in public, but I'll be singing and I'll be improvising, and just refining each repetition of the melody. I'm just refining it until it feels like the most perfect expression of the feelings that I'm feeling in that moment. Funny thing about doing songs over and over and over again is, you might have been feeling one thing when you composed the song, but the next time you're performing it, you're not exactly feeling the same thing. So I do leave a lot of room for improvisation and spontaneity in my concerts. Um, but I studied with Ali Akbar Khan, a great, one of the great Indian classical musicians for many, many, many years, and his the refinement of his melodic sense and his also kind of like complete uh, recognition of melody as being a connection to the divine realms. It really birthed in me this adoration for the beautiful melody. I try to share that as much as I can.
And we feel it. And I hope we get to see you out on the road again really soon. So I wanted to tell you one thing about our show, Jai, is that it started off, and I met our producer Tony Sweet at a UFO conference, and I was kind of mentioning that in our, as we were getting warmed up for this talk, and Jai's like, oh, I've got a UFO story. So what, you have something you want to share?
Oh yeah, I do, I really do. So this happened, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, I guess. Um, Once you turn 70, it's hard to like remember when things happened. But I was in South India, and I was staying in a Hanuman temple. Hanuman is the monkey god, the devotee of Rama. And it was a temple dedicated to my guru, Neem Karoli Baba, who had left his body. But I was visiting there, and my Indian spiritual mother, whose name was Siddhima, was staying there for a while, and I was staying at this. It was very rustic. It was out in the jungles in South India, and it was really, really just awesome place to be. So anyway, uh, one afternoon, late afternoon, I was taking a walk. There was, dirt paths. There was a little village nearby, and I was just taking a walk. And as I was walking back, well, the sunset came, and it became dark, and then in the distance, I see uh, this light, like multicolored lights, flying across the sky, and then it went over the temple. It stopped above the temple where I was staying, and it started hovering. And then I could see that it was actually a cylinder, and around the cylinder was multicolored lights, and it was just floating above the temple. And I was like, "Oh God, this is totally weird," and because I've never been like UFO oriented, so to speak, and but it was really powerful to see. And then it just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it disappeared. So I went back to the temple, and I saw Siddhima. She's an elder lady, and she was in a room with a bunch of elder ladies, and I told her, I just saw this UFO hovering over the temple, and then it disappeared, and she laughed, and she said, "Oh, you people in the West call them UFOs, but we know that these are the vehicles, the chariots of the gods and the goddesses and the ancient saints and sages of old." And and she said, just last week, I was in the mountains, and I saw what looked like a VW bus uh, flying from ridge to ridge. And I saw that it was the chariot of goddess Durga. But I thought I might be crazy. So I called my friends, and everybody saw it. So, so the ladies were laughing. And what can I say? I have no conclusion. Was it a UFO? Was it a chariot of one of the gods? Or maybe that's what UFOs are. I don't know, but that's my story.
Exactly. No, it's an incredible perspective, and how beautifully does it tie in with all the wonderful stories you've told us today, Jai. So thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much,
Transformative
Bonnie.
indeed. And we really appreciate you, and just even with your storytelling, feel that devotional love, and is really uplifting. So thank you, and I encourage everybody to listen, to find Jai Utal and Utal, and you'll feel it too. So thanks to everybody for watching, and this is Truth Be Told Transformation. Until the next time, I'm Bonnie Burkert. Namaste.